38 or 39 in the country. There still continues to be a few hot spots, but it hasn't been here locally. As you mentioned, we have 2 active cases in Owasso. I believe it's 27 total cases with 24 recovered. We have had 1 death of an Owasso resident a few weeks ago. So overall, nothing's really changed since April 24th when some personal care businesses opened and other businesses have maybe relaxed some of their guidelines. Still appears that the trend lines, again, depending on which set of data you look at it, the trend lines continue to go down. There's 126 active cases in Tulsa County. There's been 717 total, but 554 are recovered. There have been 37 deaths in Tulsa County, but 126 active cases. In Rogers County, there are only 6 active cases. And as we've mentioned twice now, in Owasso, there's 2 active cases. So that's all I would add at the moment. Definitely nothing spiking or trending up.
Thank you, Warren. So really, as far as we're concerned at this point, we've been under the governor's order for a couple of weeks now. This would be the time where we would step in and discuss whether we want to change anything here in Owasso, although it seems like at least here we're doing pretty well, and may still be a little bit of time before we see any potential spike, because there's a couple week delay from cases spiking with increased activity, or at least that's the potential theory. So I'm not sure we've seen any change, if there would have been any yet. So any comments from any of the council?
I concur. I think that we're again, just to use the term, just stay the course and wait to see if there's going to be any activity that we need to be alarmed about, and then look at if we need to take steps from a local level, municipal level.
Agreed. Anyone else?
Yeah, I agree with Doug. I mean, there's not any reason not to do anything. I mean, to do anything right now. So I'd say just leave it as is unless something shows up on the radar.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I suppose it's good news that we don't have a whole lot more to talk about with that at this point. And we'll, of course, recircle around to that topic again next week's meeting as well. So with that, we'll move on to item number 3, discussion relating to community development items. And Brian Dempster's got a few items to discuss with us. Welcome, Brian.
Thank you, Mayor, councilors. I hope everyone is doing well. All right, we have 4 items coming up for next week. This is going to be kind of a condensed version of what you'll see next week. Everything is included in your packets. If you have any questions throughout the week or anything, please don't hesitate to contact Warren and we'll answer those questions for you. The first item is a request for street and utility easement closure at the new Come and Go site on 76th Street North. The applicant is requesting to close 3 easements, a 20-foot utility easement, a 15-foot utility easement, a 7.5-foot street easement. All the required notices we sent out to the franchise holders and utility companies, and no concerns were raised. The easements were filed by separate instrument over the years, dating back to the 70s. They were there to serve the existing buildings that were on site. They're not really needed anymore. The street easement is covered with the replat that we did with the right-of-way. We got right-of-way that was needed, so that cleans that up. They're basically just trying to clean the property up so they can have a clean title. And that'll be coming next week. And I would be happy to answer any questions on that item.
So Brian, the different easements here that are being closed, it's due to the fact that the building that's going in would be covering those easements up, and so we're closing them so that they can fulfill their needs as far as the structure.
Correct. They're easements that were there serving, I would assume, probably even things that aren't even there anymore. They're just cleaning up the site. They kind of run through the middle of the site, and then one of them, and then two of the others run along Dogwood. So, but I do believe the main reason they're doing this is to have a clean title.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Okay. The second item. The second item is a request for annexation. It's 8.7 acres located at 12525 East 116th Street North. The property is located on the northwest corner of the intersection of 126th East Avenue and 116th Street North. The annexation will include a strip of right-of-way to the fire station to ensure connection to the existing city limits. So the right-of-way that we just acquired will be part of this annexation, and that will connect it to the city limits. The property is currently zoned AG agriculture residential in the county. If annexed into the city limits, it'll be brought in as agriculture. They're planning on bringing a PUD forward in June for the property. It'll consist of residential multifamily and commercial. It's for a skilled nursing facility on the back half is what they're going to do. They're going to leave the house for an administrative office for out-of-town doctors for now, but the front half along 116th they're going to propose to zone that commercial and eventually probably sell that. And I would be happy to answer any questions on that.
It says the planning commission heard this last night. Did they approve it?
Yes, planning commission heard they heard 3 of these items. The easement closure does not go to planning commission; it just goes to city council. And they voted 5-0 on all the items to recommend approval.
As far as was there any comments? Anybody there talk about this from the public at the planning commission?
I had a few phone calls yesterday, and we did have 2 property owners that live on 126. I am going to meet with them next week. Their concerns was more they would like to annex into the city, I do believe, and they kind of thought that could all be done at the same time, but there's obviously things that have to be done, and we'll meet with them and find out what we can do there.
Well, I wasn't sure how much the applicant disclosed, because obviously we're talking about an annexation here, but with the thought that there could be a multifamily, I didn't know if that would have drew anybody out or not. I'm sure it could get to that point once we get to the planning stage.
Correct. They actually sent out to all the neighbors a copy of the PUD that they're planning to bring forward.
Wow.
We asked them to do that because we did not want them to schedule a neighborhood meeting at this particular time. So they went ahead and just sent out the PUD to them, and with phone numbers that they can contact the developer with questions. I do believe that's how they're doing that.
Good for them.
And that kind of is how we ended up with people showing up last night. They had the PUD with them. But you'll hear they'll bring the PUD forward in June.
Yeah, multi-tenant, you're saying, is because it's going to be an assisted living center.
Correct. It'll be assisted senior living.
Thank you.
And then the third item, we had a request.
Brian?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Bill said assisted living, but didn't you say skilled nursing?
Yeah, I'm sorry. To me, they're the same, kind of one and the same. They call it a skilled nursing. I think the owner called it assisted living. It's just assisted living for seniors. That's what when I've talked to the owners, that's how they mentioned it. The third item is a request for final plat for Brighton Park Phase 1. It's a proposed single-family residential subdivision. It's up there for you. It's 3.43 acres located approximately a half-mile northeast of 106th Street North and west of Mingo. This property is part of a larger PUD that was approved in September, almost 5 years ago. It's OPUD 1401. It would have been, I think it was called Powderhorn. And so this is the first section of that PUD to be platted. So it's a small plat. It consists of 8 lots and 2 blocks. Water and sewer is provided by the city of Owasso. The plat doesn't include amenities. Those will be provided when the remaining of the PUD is developed. They're not really required to have any amenities until 25% is built out. They're still working, trying to clear some floodplain issues with the overall site. This is just a small section of it that they're bringing forward now. And Planning Commission heard this and voted 5-0 to recommend approval. And I would be happy to answer any questions.
Any particular reason why it's such a small plat, why this was left off of the original 46 acres?
Well, this is the first section of it to be platted. They do need to plat a portion of it to keep the PUD active, or the PUD will go void.
Have you had any surrounding citizen input on this property?
We did not.
Because I remember it was a little bit controversial when we approved this PUD.
Very much. But yeah, we had no contacts from any.
Well, that's good. That's good.
And then the last is a request for final plat for Parker Village, approximately 57.5 acres, located northeast of 106th Street North and Garnett Road intersection. This is a proposed mixed-use subdivision containing elements of single-family, multifamily, and commercial uses. The property is located within OPUD 1701-A that was approved in September of 2019, if you remember. They also brought it back to amend the PUD not too long ago. The water provider is the city of Owasso and Washington County. There is a dividing line. It's pretty much where the multifamily meets the residential. The front half will be the city of Owasso, and the back half will be, there's the dividing line right there for the water districts. There's 2 main access points on Garnett and 106th Street. And then there is an access point to the multifamily area that is a right in, right out. The Planning Commission, when we met the first time, they asked that entrance for the apartments be reduced to 80 feet to allow more room between the intersection, and they did do that, which gives them roughly little over 200 feet between intersections. And it's a right in, right out only, and there'll be a median that they won't be able to turn left when Garnett widening is approved or finished. There'll be 3 reserve areas for detention, recreation, and protected open space and landscaping. That's the A, B, and C areas there. And with that, I would answer any questions you may have.
So do we anticipate the development to start with the residential, and like they go in phases? Like phase 1 looks like it might be numbered towards the back of the.
Yeah, they have not indicated which phase at this point that they would be starting with.
Okay. As far as the multifamily, it will probably be down, you said that's in the block 7 area. That'll probably be later. Is that correct? Do you anticipate more information coming from them on that?
I believe that the multifamily will probably develop pretty quick.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
I believe that the multifamily probably will develop pretty quick.
Pretty quick, okay. Was there anyone at the planning commission last night for this item?
No, sir.
Okay. Yeah, we've seen this a few times, it seems like.
Yes. Like I said, if you have any questions from your packet, just email Warren or call Warren and we'll get you any answers you need.
Thank you.
You're muted, Chris.
Thank you. We'll now move on to item number 4, discussion relating to human resource items. Ms. Dempster has this item.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I'm very pleased about this first item I'm bringing before you, and that's to let you know that at our next council meeting, plan on bringing the FOP contract to you. Late March, early April, the FOP contacted us and proposed continuing the current contract with date changes only. That was early on in the COVID isolation and temporary closure of businesses, and they reached out to us, and I'm sure we're seeing the issues that may be happening with the budget. And so the city didn't have any language we were concerned about trying to work on or had to work on this year. So we are recommending that we approve the continuing the current contract with the FOP with date changes only. The increase in all costs associated with continuing the contract is $243,182. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
It's great news.
Absolutely.
Is that pretty much cost of living increases or just the normal?
There's no across the board increases. There are step increases for individuals who are not maxed out, but no change to the pay plan.
Thank you.
Yeah, grateful to the FOP for willing to step up like that. That's huge.
Absolutely.
And the next item I have is last year we entered into a 2-year agreement with the International Association of Firefighters, and the agreement had language that we would continue the contract for a second year. So that item will be also on the next council agenda for ratification. And the second year of the contract includes a 1.5% across the board effective July 1st and a 1.25% across the board effective January 1st of 2021. All other language remains unchanged. The increase in all costs associated with continuing the contract is $369,444. And as I mentioned, we will be presenting that at next week's City Council meeting for ratification. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thanks for all your hard work on this, Michelle. Seems like you might have caught a little break this year. It hasn't been quite as hard as most years. Seems like it's been a pretty smooth year, but happy for all the work you've done on it.
Yes, this year has been a smoothest year in a long time.
And you're not complaining.
I'm not.
All right. Thank you, Michelle. Item number 5 is presentation of the proposed fiscal year 2020-2021 annual operating budget. This will be co-presented by Warren Lear and Linda Jones.
Thank you, Mayor. There we go. Happy to be providing you this overview. I think you received your budgets last Friday. It's an interesting year to be working on a budget. In some ways it's simpler, in some ways more complicated. But we'll try to walk through this. It's more or less a high level overview. I think overall it's very good news. Owasso is positioned fairly well. Linda will go over the May distribution of sales tax in just a little bit. As we've mentioned, the preliminary numbers were not as bad as they could have been. We have a lot to be thankful for. I'll start off with some items from the transmittal letter in the budget. As of April 30th, the city's past 12-month sales tax revenue was actually 4.6% higher than the previous 12 months. And this is obviously good news. We were in good shape, as has been mentioned, going into May. We were about $1.3 million ahead of budget, so we had some cushion going into this season of COVID-19 and reduced, potentially significantly reduced sales tax. As a result of the season we're in, this budget anticipates significantly lowered sales tax projections for May, June, July, and August to the tune of about $1.75 million due to the expected impact of COVID-19, social distancing, business closures, reopening modifications. Overall, for this period, 4-month period, we'll project about a 17% decrease from the prior year. However, again, I said mostly good news. Owasso so far is faring a little bit better on retail sales than many municipalities across the state. We have the advantage of having some retail facilities, Sam's, Walmart, Aldi, Reese's, Target, Home Depot, Lowe's, and others that aren't available in all of the surrounding communities. So, as has been talked about, there's been significant traffic in those retail stores. Overall, on the negative side, the statewide economy is expected to maintain more or less a depressed state due to substantially lower oil prices. But Owasso has been in the past somewhat insulated from oil contractions, as we have very few oil and gas employers in Owasso. So overall, as we go through this, I think there's good news. We have in this budget anticipated a 1% decrease in sales tax, which is about $164,000 less budget to budget over last year. That's, I think, the first time in my memory that has happened. I don't recall. I know over the years and during the recession, we did have 1 year where our sales tax receipts were slightly less than the previous years, and then that has occurred also in the past, but it's been many, many, many years since we budgeted a decrease in sales tax. The good news there is that budget to budget, we're anticipating a 24% increase in use tax. In terms of the city's overall budget, these are not huge amounts. $164,000 decrease and a $567,000 increase are really not enough to cause major changes in our budget. So what you'll see is somewhat of a flat budget. But over the past several years on use tax, as internet sales, online sales have continued to increase, and our share of those has due to companies like Amazon unilaterally working out agreements with the states to collect state and local sales tax, and several other companies coming online. Our use tax from those online sales has increased in the 30 to 40% range over the last few years. So I think still fairly conservative. One thing you'll find about Ms. Jones and the finance department and our directors, for that matter, is fiscally, I think, very conservative. So a 24% increase budget to budget is still, we think, pretty conservative when looking at the last few years, the 30 to 40% increases that we've experienced. Moving on to the next slide, it shows where we look to arrive in terms of fund balance. You'll see that our fund balance position is the best it's been in the last 10 to 15 years, at least, maybe the best it's ever been. We typically have gone by a 15% target for fund balance reserve, but this budget is conservatively built on a 34% fund balance reserve to enable the city to ensure continuity of services in a very uncertain economy. So those numbers are really thrilled to report those numbers. It is important to note, though, that in a major depression or a major downturn, even 30% reserves are not sufficient to continue services at the same level for long periods of time. But that's good news. In this budget, in terms of fixed cost increases, we've got salary and benefits, as had been mentioned already, with the potential approval of our FOP contract and the ratification of a second year of our IAFF contract. There are some salary and benefit increases there. However, there are no scheduled improvements or increases across the board for either police, as was mentioned, or non-union employees. There is an increase in the sales tax debt service for our CIP fund. As you're aware, that goes up and down, but about $1 million increased debt service there. We'll look at that a little closer in a chart and a graph later on. In terms of staffing, we do look to add one full-time mechanic in the city garage. That's something that's been needed for some time. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but our fleet numbers have increased threefold, fourfold, or fivefold. I'm not sure which, but it's exponentially almost, and we've gone from one mechanic to two. So we're really in need of hiring an additional mechanic for our city garage. And then, as we committed as a part of a 2-year plan last year, we will move one part-time assistant golf professional to full-time. This budget also anticipates a little bit unusual. This is a partial year staffing increase. Our longtime engineering tech, Jeff Bain, is retiring, and Jeff fulfills so many different functions in so many different ways. We hope to have somebody on board to work with him for at least 3 or 4 months, maybe as much as 6 months. We put 6 months of pay to have an overlap in the OPWA budget for a new hire. That is not an increase of a position. It's simply partial year for the person who will be taking over the full-time position that Jeff will be vacating. Some third penny projects that you're fully aware of that are ongoing. Garnett widening from 96th to 106th and 106th to 116th. 76th Street widening that's underway, and then those 3 intersections listed, 106th and 129th, 106th, 145th, 116th, and 129th. In this budget, there's about $7 million allocated as those projects continue to move forward. Happy to say again that we're in a position to not reduce our annual street rehabilitation. You can see what's happened to that over the years. Somewhat of a broken record, but in 1996, Poe and Associates told us that we needed to look at about $1.6 million a year total. That was an engineering firm in 1996. I always have a belief that engineering firms do great work, but those projections might have been a little higher than that's just my personal opinion, nothing against engineers, but $1.6 million a year, that was pretty healthy back in 1996. We know that in 1996 to 2013, we spent a little less than $400,000 a year. We still, as you know, have fairly good streets. That's a very debatable subject with some folks, but if you look at our street grades and ratings, they're very good. But that's partially due to the fact that this council and this staff has been committed to spending between $1 million and $1.8 million, $1 million the last from 2014, 15, and 16, and then $1.8 million for the last 4 years, and that's what we look to spend in this next budget. If you'll recall, we dedicated, informally dedicated a portion of the half penny, the 30% portion. We said we'd try to spend $800,000 per year from the proceeds of the half penny to street rehab, and we've done that every year. And then we've added $1 million every year from the CIP fund. So happy to continue that practice. Vision recapture sales tax. This is the Vision for Owasso 55/100ths recapture of Vision 2025 6/10 of a penny from the 2016 election. As you're aware, for the 7 years that the voters approved recapturing that 55/100ths for the 7 years, we are in the midst of the three projects mentioned that are subdivided into probably 15 or 20 projects, but 96th Street between 119th East Avenue, which is where the concrete meets the asphalt, just north of J.C. Penney, all the way to 129th East Avenue, and then 116th Street from Mingo to Highway 169, and then of course that includes the 116th Street and Garnett intersection. We will collect about $4.8 million in FY21, and we should be able to. We're moving right along with all those projects and should be able to spend that. Here's a breakdown of about $2.1 million in street rehab. I've already mentioned the $1.8 million for maintenance and renovation of our existing streets. But you can see there that street maintenance includes far more than just street repair and renovation, street lighting, traffic control maintenance, crack sealing, and so forth. So the total there is $2,120,240 that this budget anticipates for street maintenance. Also anticipated, as you're aware, with our CIP fund, projects are taken care of when they're ready, but there is money set aside for a fire engine for Station 1. That is a high priority. We're not in that's about a $750,000 to $800,000 piece of equipment when you add the equipment that goes along with the engine. And we're not in a hurry to make that purchase. We'd like to get through these next few months and see how they are. We could limp by with the engine that's currently at Station 1, but that is a high priority still in this budget, but we'll take a look at it as we go through the year. In terms of stormwater projects from the CIP third penny, these are carryover projects. About $900,000 for the Central Park Lake Bridge Drainage Channel. You've seen that project a lot. We're just getting ready to finally get started on that after working things out with the residents. And then you've also heard a lot about the Sports Park Regional Detention Pond. That's about a $4.6 million project that comes out of third penny funding. And then for quality of life type projects, you've heard, you're well aware of these also. These are funded from different places. The Elm Creek Bank stabilization that I believe is getting ready to go out to bid. The improvements at Fantastic Island, which will actually be CIP money, but were originally Vision Excess money. But if you recall, there was a trading of funds to get that Vision Excess money spent. So we spent Vision Excess funds, I believe, on the Redbud Festival Park, and now we'll look to CIP to basically pay back that allocation, so to speak, for improvements, a splash pad at Fantastic Islands, improvements to the playground equipment there, a 5K trail, and some improvements to the access roads on either end. Also in this budget, from the Ambulance Capital Fund, one ambulance remount and a power lift cot. From Community Development Block Grant Funds and OPWA, actually $134,000 from each fund. CDBG, that's about what we anticipate getting, and then OPWA Capital to move closer to completion on our Hale Acres wastewater improvements that you've seen ongoing over the years. Look forward to getting close to completion there. Some OPWA capital costs anticipated in this budget. You can read those: utility billing truck, dump bed truck, a leak detector, that's a water leak detector, a camera trailer unit, The camera trailer, that's for wastewater and stormwater lines. We use the camera, the in-pipe camera, to inspect both older lines for needed repairs and also inspect new lines to make sure that they are constructed and installed per specs. A CNG refuse truck is one of the larger items on that list. That's about $370,000. Repairs to the wastewater treatment plant building, that's only about $30,000, but that building was built in the mid-'80s, and there's some needed repairs to the lab. And then those last two items mostly have to do with lift station repairs, a bypass trash pump. Says trash, but it's actually a wastewater bypass pump when there's lift station repairs needed so that you can run the wastewater around the pump. Actually, that's a 1-ton cabin chassis, looking to spend about $15,000 on a used vehicle there to handle the transfer tank, which is a diesel tank to fuel the lift station generator, and the crane unit, which is used to lift wet well pumps for repair. So just a number of miscellaneous highly needed capital expenditures in OPWA. Some OPWA capital in process. You've seen all of these, but this is this slide I call the high cost of treating wastewater. This is about this is over $25 million in wastewater treatment. As you're aware, this hopefully one of the largest and for a long time. Our wastewater treatment plant upgrade is about $20.5 million. The Coffee Creek lift station is about $3.4 million. The Owasso Market gravity line, $700,000, and the Ranch Creek interceptor upgrade, about $1 million. These are all capital projects that are currently in process. So the fund balance goals I mentioned earlier would be to maintain a 15% reserve in the general fund. You saw that this budget anticipates a greater than 30% in reserves. At the same time, we want to take about $500,000 off of the OPGA deficit. And you can see from this next slide, this was a plan that council approved in 2014 to pay down the OPGA deficit that had accumulated over many years. And you can see that this budget anticipates taking it down another $500,000. And actually, if we continue on the track that we're going, we could pay it off about 3 years early in, I believe, FY 2024. So again, another really good sign of fiscal conservative policy. Just so pleased. Linda and I have worked together for a few years now, and we share that conservative viewpoint, and she does a great job trying to keep our finances in great shape. Budget's based on a few assumptions, but mainly the continuation. We're in the final year of the 5-year utility rate plan for water, wastewater, stormwater, and refuse service, and the transfers to accommodate golf operations that occur each year, and in reducing the deficit. Here you get a good picture of the OPWA utility system and CIP debt service payments, the major debt that the city has. I like to look at this. I might need to be corrected, but I look at this fairly simplistically. 1 penny of sales tax in Owasso in the past has brought about $8 million, and now it's getting closer to $9 million. So you can see there from this chart that our CIP debt service amounts to about $5 million out of that $9 million that we collect in the CIP fund. $5 million a year over the next 6 years, and then about $3 million over the next 2 years, and about $1 million a year. Again, I'm just looking at the CIP for 4 years after that. Of course, there will always be new CIP projects needed and added to the list, But again, this chart is a good indication that our debt service to receipts ratio maintains very healthy. We still have choices. In a growing community, your capital improvements fund is going to be always tapped, always pressured, and ours is no different. But this chart indicates very positive numbers. And then finally, there are some statutory steps in the budget. The next steps would be the June 2nd public hearing, and then we would anticipate bringing the budget to you for an adoption. Obviously, there's quite a bit of time between now and then, over a month, for any input, questions, as you get a chance to digest this budget. And then July 31st is the date that we are required to have our adopted budget filed with the state auditor. I want to certainly thank you, counselors, for the time that you'll spend looking over this budget, but really want to thank, well, first our directors spend time as early as the fall, really going through their budget and looking at their needs and determining what is of a high priority, and then providing some medium priority items for us. And they're always very flexible when we finally bring them the budget projections, the sales tax and use tax, which is far and away the largest source of our revenues. And then when we get a realistic view of what we can and can't do in the budget, the directors are always very flexible. But specifically, I want to thank Linda Jones, our finance director, Jennifer Newman, our assistant director, and Chris Garrett, the assistant city manager. They handle the major work in putting together this budget and do a great job every year. I think we all somewhat think on the same page. They do the work, and I appreciate them very much. I don't think we could have anybody better in any of those positions. In fact, I really have no doubt about that. We have an outstanding staff, directors, finance department, assistant city manager. With that, I will turn it over. First, I guess I could ask Linda if I misstated anything. There's always a chance of that, or if you have questions.
I think you stated it very well. I'd be happy to answer any questions that council has.
Yay, Warren. I was going to ask, could we get a copy of this PowerPoint? That really does sum it up pretty well, and I think might help me stay on course, because obviously there's a lot of detail with it, and very nicely done as in the past few years, Linda, that you all have assembled a budget, and it's easy to read, but there is a lot of detail.
Absolutely. We will send that to you tomorrow.
Thank you. Questions I had, a couple. So the budget, obviously, we just now got May's numbers for sales tax. And Warren, if you said this, I missed it. So we obviously were scaling back a little bit on our projections and plans for the next year. What basis? What was there a percentage? What did we look at there as far as what we were looking to if everything was great, no COVID, versus now we got a COVID and we've got to make adjustments to our budget?
I will let Linda answer that a little bit, but give you the big overview. Yes, there are a lot of things. Of course, we mentioned the May, June, July, and August, anticipating a 17% decrease. Still some significant months where we'll take a hit, and an overall reduction actually in sales tax. But we do look, I'm glad you asked that question. We would like to add a few things back into the budget mid-year if possible. We'd want to certainly look at a couple of police officers. We have a significant greens renovation at the golf course that really needs to take place. We've recently got some good news on the price of doing that, but your biggest loss there is the loss of business over the couple of months of growing those in. And there are other urgent needs that were in this budget but are no longer because of the significant reduction in sales tax. As far as specific percentages, Linda, do you want to talk about that? I know you looked at it kind of month on a month by month basis.
We looked at the data by merchant and by merchant code to look at the different industries to best estimate the impact to each industry. And so we looked at restaurants differently than we looked at box stores, and those differently from stores that were open the entire time. And so we estimated some of the stores that were open the entire time actually above normal sales because people were shifting spending. Maybe before they might have bought clothing at Kohl's and maybe they needed it, so they bought it at Walmart. They bought it at Walmart or whatever. We just looked at some shifts in items. And so we did that by industry code, but overall, if you look at the months that we adjusted down about $500,000 a month is how it came out. But that wasn't just pulled out of the air. That was very strategically analyzed industry by industry and how we adjusted that.
Okay. No, I understand that. That's good. I know you talked in this about getting the information from those that are out there, and you also talked about the oil industry hasn't necessarily, when things have been depressed, hasn't necessarily impacted us a whole lot. I almost think this might be an exceptional year for that compared especially to 2008. Has there been any discussion with some of the smaller companies that reside around Owasso that make things for oil company, for the oil parts? I think of machine shops, Nego and those folks. Have you heard if they've had any layoffs, or have they been impacted? That's the word I'm looking for.
I'm not aware of those specific discussions. I know that our Economic Development Director, Chelsea Levo-Ferry, has had discussions with various businesses, but I'm not aware that those small parts manufacturing companies that you mentioned, I'm not aware that that'll have a major impact on our budget, but it's a very good question.
I just look at it in terms, I know there's probably not a lot of employees compared to some of the bigger oil companies for sure, but obviously there's some employees that work there, and certainly if they're getting impacted, that may be a sign too. Just asking.
No, it's a good question. I guess I would say there are enough high-level projections that Linda and the finance department is trying to make, and those are based on educated guesses and strategy and projections based on outcomes, anticipated outcomes, but not aware of any discussions at that level. I will say this, we look to Mark Sneed every year. You're aware that our economic summit was postponed, and it will actually happen on June 11th. It'll be in the form of a Zoom meeting, but Dr. Sneed has continued to look at our, I can't remember what it's called, micro analysis for our Owasso community. And I know that in the past, those have I think always been fairly affirmational or confirming of some of the numbers that we've looked at, but we'll certainly look at those numbers again this year. I'm sure Linda especially, but we'll be looking very carefully at what Dr. Sneed has to say on June 11th.
Sounds good. I only had one more question. The positions that you're looking to add, could you tell me what departments, like the vehicle maintenance tech and the engineering tech positions, or which departments would that show up in the budget?
The support services is the department for the mechanic, and the engineering tech position, Jeff Bain, I believe that's OPWA. Do you know him? OPWA.
It is OPWA. The part-time person, Jeff Bain, is normally out of the general fund, but because of budget constraints on the general fund, we put this part-year supplement in the OPWA fund. And then once Jeff leaves, that'll shift over. where it normally is.
Mm.
As far as the vehicle maintenance in your budget book, that would show in the city garage fund towards the back of your book. That's where each department is assessed an amount to cover their share of the cost to run our own internal vehicle maintenance facility, and that covers the labor costs. They also budget parts too, but that is all run through that internal service fund called City Garage.
And then Linda, you had some input on the previous question.
I'm trying to remember what the last question was.
Oh, I was just talking about percentages and layoffs and things like that. Kind of covered a general thing there as far as trying to figure out how you were projecting potential downturns in the budget.
I was just going to add to what Mr. Lear said that I did have a conversation and some follow-up with the economist, Mr. Sneed, and so he has not completed the analysis. When we put off the presentation, then he stopped work on it so that he'd have fresher data when we had it later. But his company has worked closely with the state and is helping them in their projections and analysis. And so he had some of that information. So we did get some information from him, and he did agree with some of the premises that I was working under, and that that the oil would have some impact, but not significant yet. And so we'll be monitoring that to see how long that lasts and how severe it is as we go forward.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Well, I'd just like to say, first off, did a great job. This is, again, I said it probably every year, but you guys write a almost 200-page book every year when you do this, and it just gets better and better every year as far as the detail, and even the appearance of it is just very pleasant to read. My question is, I know the governor and his team has kept this pretty close to the vest as far as federal money for COVID. There hasn't been a lot of information really about how much municipalities are going to receive. Do we try and factor in a ballpark number at all, or do we think we're going to benefit at all from that, or is that just going to be a bonus if we do get it?
It's probably a little bit too early to tell. There's a significant sum of the, as you probably aware, the state received or will receive a total of about 1.25 billion. I want to say that Tulsa County will receive about 114 million, and Oklahoma County 140 million. Those are limited to population bases of 500,000 or more. Right now, we're understanding from both the state and Tulsa County that we are eligible for funds from both, and really as we speak. I just got a call before I came to this meeting from Jed Cochran with the city of Tulsa. We're working on conference calls with the county, with the state, with the city, and with the surrounding cities, and really trying to determine what the application process will be and what limits there will be to reimbursement for those funds, what actually will qualify and what won't. Right now, we know that sales tax shortfalls will not, revenue shortfalls will not qualify at this point. There's been some lobbying to try to maybe open up some minds on that, but I don't see a lot of hope in that. But I don't believe, I'm not aware that Linda has, we're anticipating anything right now, but I know we will be getting some reimbursement, but I'm not sure how much that will be.
Okay.
It's still up in the air, and we didn't build anything into the budget at this point.
So if something does come through, it'll just be unanticipated funds.
Yes.
Correct. We would come back
But
with a budget amendment.
And what kind of things, if it's not for a revenue shortfall, what kind of things would it be spent on?
Yeah, I could give you a better list. I could look up an email, but personal protective equipment, remote work needs, IT equipment, additional labor, ambulance runs for COVID-19 cases, any expense and related to the pandemic. So we've developed a fairly lengthy list and have submitted those projections, those guesstimates. Right now we've submitted to the county, I believe, just expenses through June 1, but the state is taking submissions. We're eligible to be reimbursed all the way through the end of December this year under this federal funding. So those type of expenses, personal protective equipment, I think I already mentioned, any direct expenses directly related to response to COVID-19.
Warren, you
Okay,
mentioned
thank
that if projections increase, we might add some line items back into this budget for some of these urgently needed items. What are the procedures going to be for that if you want to amend or update the budget?
That would just be a budget amendment that would come to you probably in the earliest would be early fall, but could be late fall or winter. If we look to, for instance, if we wanted to hire a couple of police officers, it would need a budget amendment, and that would come to you. You'd get a good picture. We'd give you a picture of, where we stood financially and how we believe that we could achieve those additional expenses. But it would definitely require your approval.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Well, I'll just close by saying that, I think some people will look at us and say Owasso's fortunate to be in the position we are, and I'll agree that we are, but, sometimes fortune is made by very skilled decision making. I think that's what we're fortunate to have staff that is very conservative and makes decisions that put us in a pretty good position to move forward in times that others may be struggling. So just want to reiterate that I'm very thankful for this staff and putting us in the position we are right now.
Thank you, Mayor.
Agreed.
All right, we will move on to item number 6, discussion relating to city manager items. Mr. Lear.
Thank you, Mayor. And Ms. Jones will bring the sales tax report.
You will see in your monthly sales tax report that we were about $81,000 below budget on sales tax. That was expected because of the restaurant closure and business closure due to the COVID pandemic. I will say that it's a little better than what we thought it could be, which is good news. But I will also say that while we don't have the breakout for the May distribution yet by vendor, we did get the breakout for April, and there were a number of restaurants that paid late because of everything that's going on with the closure. I expect they paid late, and so we know that this number includes some delinquent collections on those restaurants. So if they had paid on time last month, would have looked better, and this month would look worse. So what we don't know until we see the breakout is if they paid late again, in which case it's kind of a wash. But overall, we built in our projections when we built the budget initially, and we were deciding what to put in the budget, we had built in a little bit lower number this month. So this is good. It looks better than we feared it could. We knew, or we expected, there was that emergency shopping as people were buying the disinfectant wipes and the toilet paper that everybody saw missing from the shelf pretty quickly. So we knew there would be some offset the first month. With the closure being mid-month, we had only half a month impact. And with that emergency shopping, then we had some extra purchases offsetting that loss of income from the restaurant business. So it's an unusual month. Next month, I would expect we would be much further below budget next month, and that's how we built the budget and for the next few months. So if you look at the next page at the year-to-year comparison, interestingly, we actually were higher than a year ago, and that's reflective of the fact we were growing all year up until this point, up until the closure. So, you know, we are in a much better position than most of the municipalities across the state. And then if you go on to your last page with the use tax, you can see what Mr. Lear referred to, that growth in use tax. And we've been about 31% above the prior year, year to date. So we've had extreme growth in use tax, and that's some of the shift from in-store shopping to online shopping, and some of the shift from out-of-state vendors reporting now that maybe haven't in the past. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
It looks like we're fortunate so far, anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Linda. If there are no other questions, I'll move to just a few other items that you'll want to know about. This Thursday is a mediation with property at what Owassans know as German Corner, 116th and Garnett, a key piece of property actually owned by Key Plus. As you recall, the owner is asking for a substantial amount for the right-of-way and easements needed for those improvements, close to $1 million. So that mediation hopefully will be successful, but that is this Thursday. On another front, you all know Assistant Fire Chief Mark Stuckey. What you might not know is that Mark has worked for the city of Owasso for 35 years. He actually started out, if I recall this correctly, actually started out in the police department and then saw the light and went to the fire department. Now, there were those that started in the fire department and saw the light and went to the police department. So that has happened over the years. But Chief Stuckey has been with us a long time. You've seen him make many presentations. He is leaving to be the fire chief at Ascension Island. That's Ascension, like ascending. Ascension Island in the middle of the Atlantic. He's going to work as the fire chief on Ascension Island. I believe there's 700 residents on this island. It's a United States National Defense contract. And when you get a chance, Google Ascension Island. It's a tough duty that he's pulled there. But wonderful opportunity for him for this position. His departure leaves a large hole. But through a thorough process, promotional process, Captain Jeremy Goldstein has been promoted to Assistant Fire Chief, taking over former Fire Chief, Assistant Chief Stuckey's responsibility. Jeremy has been spending a lot of time with some of these responsibilities over the years, and she will do an outstanding job. So congratulate Jeremy when you get a chance. Speaking of fire and police, we're in the midst of National Police Week. This is a week to honor those brave men and women in law enforcement who have lost their lives while serving their communities, and also to honor the sacrifices made every day by law enforcement officers to provide us a very important sense of security in our community. This Friday, the 15th, is National Peace Officers Memorial Day. Couldn't be more proud of our police department. As you mentioned, they voted to renew their continuing current contract. We appreciate negotiating fairly and equitably with our unions. We have a great police department, and we hope you'll take a time to thank a law enforcement officer this week. Next week is National Public Works Week. And I'm just going to read an email I got yesterday. We also have an outstanding public works department, and at the top of the list is our refuse department. I've received an email from a citizen. It actually went to Roger Stevens, but So just wanted to shoot you an email regarding your driver that runs the route in Honey Creek, and it gives the address. Just wanted to let you know this guy is an all-star. He is polite and cares about doing a good job. As a local business owner, I know how difficult it can be at times to find these types of characteristics in employees and for them to wear your brand and represent the company. Therefore, just wanted to share about this guy that he is killing it for you and the city of Owasso. And that was, we get those quite often. That's one of our refuse truck drivers. They do care a lot and do a great job. That gentleman is Ed Seagroves, and Ed does a great job for us. So although it can't be National Hug a Refuse Worker Week, but please say thank you to not only our refuse department, but water, wastewater, stormwater, all the folks that you see in Public Works trucks, and Roger Stevens and Travis Blundell. They just do an outstanding job. And that's next week, National Public Works Week. And that concludes my report, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Thank you, Warren. Good report. Any comments from city councilors or trustees? Okay. If there's no comments, I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Mr. Dunn?
Julie, can you? Yeah, thanks.
Mr. Dunn?
Yes.
Mr. Bumbright?
Yes.
Mr. Bush?
Yes.
Miss Lewis? Miss Lewis? Mr. Kelly?
Yes. We are adjourned.
Good night,
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Have a
you.
great evening.
Have a good evening.